Hello there, and welcome to Sync Music Matters, a podcast that explores the beautiful relationship between music and the moving image. My name is Jim Hustwit, and I'm your host on this journey, as each week I seek to understand the people and the process behind the best music in TV, film and games. I'm talking to composers, but I'm also talking to editors, music supervisors, directors, and anyone else who's involved with the synchronous process of pairing audio and visuals. Anna Meredith MBE. So Anna was awarded an MBE for services to music in the 2019 Queen's Birthday Honour List. She's a genre-crossing composer and producer whose work blends the worlds of contemporary classical, art pop, electronica and experimental rock. In terms of her artist work, you can check out Varmints, for which she won the Scottish Album of the Year award, and the Mercury Prize nominated album FIBS, which Pitchfork lauded as one of the best experimental albums of 2019. Her recent film credits include The End We Start From, starring Jodie Comer, which is in cinemas as we speak, Paul Rudd's dark comedy Living With Yourself for Netflix, and A24s Tuesday, starring Julia Louis-Dreyfus, which is due to be released sometime this year being 2024. Anna Meredith, thanks for joining me.
Hello.
Hi. So the first question I always ask is, if we were to sort of rewind back to when you were a young whippersnapper, if someone had asked you, what would you like to be when you grow up, what would you have replied?
I guess what level of whippersnapper I'm thinking about?
Let's say between 8 and 12.
Okay, really young whippersnapper or moderately young. Nothing to do with music, I think. Probably some kind of circus performer situation. Definitely not related to skill or talent in any aspect. I think I used to do a thing where I would try and stand up on my swing and... this is making me feel like a very uncool 12-year-old, but let's lean with 8 and stand up on my swing and then very laboriously and clumsily turn around in it while standing and think, God, that's going to blow everyone's mind at the circus. So that I thought would be my big career coming up.
That feels like sort of entry-level trapeze. That's where,
yeah, just an entirely stationary swing.
Yeah.
So some sweating child slowly stands around it.
So where did the circus thing come from? Had you been to a circus?
Must have. Or, I was probably reading some kind of great 80s book about, Mr. and Mrs. Cosmo the Conjurer. That's kind of suddenly coming back to me as a book, I think just desire for, I don't know, as I say this, I wasn't doing any gymnastics or ballet or anything sort of performing like that. I think I just had whimsical dreams that were entirely not related to skill.
No. Well, it sounds like you just wanted to blow people's minds. So,
right, yes, but not with my swing.
Not with the swings in the end, yeah. And you sort of implied as well that there may have been an evolution from circus performer. Were there sort of other iterations of
other terrible skills? Definitely the music-y stuff has taken a long time to kind of feel that that's what I do. For a while, I think I probably thought some kind of creative writing. I dithered about looking at doing English, at uni, and I thought I might want to go study clarinet rather than, anything to do with writing music. Initially, sad realisation that not actually good enough at the clarinet, as with the swing skills or the writing skills for that matter. So, I think there's just a lot of sad home truths leading to leaning into other skills that gradually honed in on, and also a bit of realising, I don't think I'd thought about writing music, and realising that certain thoughts or impulses about music or creativity, or even just listening to a piece of music and feeling urges that the piece should do X, Y, and Z actually is a kind of the beginnings of little creative ideas, and that maybe that was something to listen to or recognise in its own right. Yeah.
So, and at what stage did that happen then? Because obviously you perform music and you're obviously clarinetist and had an idea of perhaps going to university to study. When did the playing turn into composing, creating?
I mean, the first piece I wrote was the pieces you had to do for your standard grades in Scotland, like your GCSEs. So I wasn't someone who was writing music as a kid at all. I had no concept or awareness of music as a creative thing. You know, I started to do little bits of playing, you know, recorder and Scottish fiddle and that kind of stuff, and then started learning clarinet at high school. I think it kind of late teen, you know, so did this little tiny terrible pieces for my school exams, and then, you know, probably late teen, or, you know, 16ish, I think I was, you know, starting to play in lots of youth orchestras and wind bands and stuff. I loved that, and, you know, it meant I got to play all kinds of music. And I guess I just started to sometimes notice these really strong senses of the music, of, you know, of feeling, oh, it should do this, or it should end here, or it should, what did this happen? And I wouldn't be having nothing practical, and also isn't sort of like, Beethoven, you stand aside, I've got a better idea. But it was just these ideas, you know, these sort of, I think, beginnings of trusting my instinct, which has kind of been a bit of a thing that I've learned to really lean on. And I was lucky that I had the little weird little pieces I wrote for these school exams. My teacher was like, oh, these are quite interesting. And, you know, I did a few more, but I think I was still at that point thinking it was going to be clarinet. And it was only a bit later that, you know, these, in hindsight, absolutely awful, but little school, tiny, clumsily written pieces with back to front crotchet heads and stuff became, you know, thinking, well, maybe I'll go and do it. You know, I did a general music degree. I didn't do, you know, study just composing or just clarinet. I went to York, where, you know, you do a music degree. And actually I did absolutely no composing, really. I did tons of playing and ran the new music group, which was also really useful because you kind of did the practical stuff about players and hiring practice rooms and getting hold of music and stuff that's the kind of unglamorous side of music making. So I'm not sure if that's answered your question. Very rambling, sorry.
Yeah, well, I mean, for what it's worth, I quite like the idea of you rewriting Beethoven, going, hang on a minute.
I've got a better idea. How about this?
Yeah. So that was sort of your first sort of, I suppose, feeling into creating yourself. At what point did it become an idea that, oh, hang on a minute, I could do this as a career. I could do music as a career, whether that be performing or but certainly as a composing or writing.
I mean, way later. You know, I went to do. I did a postgrad in composing, and weirdly, even though that was, I suppose, more specific, the fact of, you know, that was at the Royal College and very prestigious and first time in London and all that kind of thing, but so, as well as being a very focused environment, it was also fairly intimidating, and, you know, starting to actually get a handle of what being a composer, especially a kind of contemporary classical, which is sort of what I was studying, or the world I was, that type of course was entering you into at that time. What that involved, and how little I knew, how little contemporary music I knew, how little skill I had, and, you know, technical skill I'd, you know, taught or had developed. So I think it took me a long, even after I graduated from there, and I had a junior fellowship there where I went back, and I think, you know, and it was the very first commissions where people start to ask you to write stuff, and maybe it's for hardly any money, or you know, but you're still doing other things to help finance it all. So I don't remember there ever being a kind of like, yes, I am a composer moment. It just kind of evolves until gradually it's the only thing you're doing. Or you know, even while I don't think that has to be the only marker. You know, plenty of people, myself included, have done all kinds of stuff to support what they do. I think it was just maybe where it felt like there was a continuity of things. You know, that one thing seemed to be leading to another, and stuff like that. But I don't know if there's a particular thing that feels defining.
No particular milestone. Mm. Do you remember the first compositional project that you got paid for?
That's a really good question. I'm trying to remember. I mean, there was some that felt really important. I did a just after college, I wrote, or a really short orchestra piece of mine was used in a workshop for kind of young composers at the Huddersfield Contemporary Music Festival, and where James Macmillan conducted. And I'd already done this piece as a little mini piece at college, and he conducted it, and it was the BBC Philharmonic, and that felt really big and really exciting. I don't think that was paid for, because it was a piece I'd written as a student, but that piece then led to me becoming composer in residence at the BBC Scottish Symphony Orchestra, which did have some paid commissions as part of it. So I think the kind of grown-upness or beginning of that thing felt like a important seed for what then came next.
Yeah, sure. And just picking up on, I think a couple of times you mentioned skill and almost a realization or understanding that you felt like your skills were falling short of what you wanted to do. How much do you think skill is an important part of composing, of just creative expression and capturing that?
I think it completely varies. I think it's about what you as an individual musician or composer want to do. I think for me it's much less interesting skill than authenticity or ideas. If you've got a great idea and you don't know how to write it down, that is much less of a problem than having amazing notation skills but no ideas. I think if you can sing an idea down or draw it down, that's a much more I'd hate for skill or some kind of training to be the obstacle to actually doing something creative. That being said, I know for a lot of people, they've really honed their voices through, careful study and technique. So I think it's kind of down to what feels authentic and right for each individual person. If one person feels that finding the thing that they want to do really involves certain techniques or ways of writing, or then I think that's brilliant. And for other people, if it's about almost deliberately going the other way and just trying to purely work instinctively, intuitively, great. I think I kind of am somewhere in the middle where I really trust my instinct, but I know I have to use quite a lot of not by some people probably wouldn't consider massive skill, but I definitely have to use the skills I've learned and notationally to handle rhythm and pacing the way that I like to do, and that I wouldn't be able to do that if I didn't know how to notate music, or if I hadn't had some of the foundations I did.
Yeah, sure. And something that's quite interesting as well is the fine line between art and commerce, and obviously with you as a music artist, as well as being a composer, you're straddling that line between art and commerce. How much do you feel like your artistry informs the kind of more commercial side of things when you're writing to picture and on compositional projects?
I'd like to say, I'm trying to think if this is in any way not true or disingenuous. I'd like to say that I try really hard to just lean into the artist side, and that I don't try to take anything that would be having to sound like anybody else, not necessarily of any big principled reason, just that I'd be rubbish at it. I know that I can't. If someone wanted me to write a different way, I can try and do my version of that thing, but even then I'd so much rather always be writing under my own parameters and benchmarks and ideas than certainly anyone else's musical templates. So yeah, I'm trying as much as I can to just be self-led. And if those things manage to have kind of commercial versions of them, and of course, it would be untrue, I think, to say that there aren't because now some stuff is being used in quite commercial ways that I've done, and I love that. It's great, and it's fun, and I really enjoy that side of it. And it obviously has its own challenges and composition creatively, but I don't know. The way that I approach writing is very tapped into a kind of quite blinkered, internal, drive-driven. In order to write the way that I do, I have to believe that it's just me doing my thing. So I might be trying to do through a lens to fulfill a brief of a particular thing, but the actual literal writing is not really thinking about that too much, because I will just do a much better job if I'm just trying to deal with a problem musically.
And so does it, presumably then your creative process, is there kind of nuanced different approaches if you're writing for a film versus just doing your own thing, or is the process very much the same?
It's pretty similar. Most things I do, I draw, or I step very far back and I draw a kind of outline of the shape of what I'm trying to do, the sort of pacing, the sort of dramatic outline. Or sometimes I can just imagine that in my head. I don't have to draw it anymore, but that idea of zooming out for where the high points are, where changes of feel might be, where something new might enter, I like to imagine that in a timeline. So I will use that approach for anything I'm writing, whether that was an orchestra piece or my band stuff. But with a film, that shape would be dictated by something else. But from there, the process of getting the shape, working out what needs to happen where, making a kind of mood board version of that shape where I might put in some little snapshots, okay, this big switch of feel could be based around this little chord or this rhythm or something, to then notating everything then goes into Sibelius. And then from there, I export the MIDI and work in Ableton. So I'll use that same process even if what I'm finally writing is completely electronic. But yeah, might be that the shape, I guess fundamentally the shape being the main thing, is controlled by something I haven't come up with. Yeah,
but it sounds like the starting point is quite visual then. If the sort of your first port of call you go to is to create a timeline, and you're creating a mood board. And I noticed, is the artwork of your albums, is that your own art?
No, it's my sister.
Oh, it's your sister. Okay.
Yeah.
But that's fascinating that the starting point is sort of almost a visual.
Yeah. I like it because if I was working with someone else, a dancer, a visual arts maker, that, a filmmaker, you can be looking at something quite visual and be like, okay, at this point, and you can all, you're not saying the 5/4 section, the whatever, everyone can see these shapes, and when we're all, and if you're making something together, you can be saying, okay, we're going to build and build and build, and then at this point, I think it should thin out to something, and they can make a visual equivalent, and you can make a musical equivalent, and you're all on the same page about what is happening directionally, what the energy is, and what the intention is, what the transformation or what the direction is for each moment. So it's not thinking visually in a kind of synesthetic, yes, this is blue or this is colours. It's all about direction, really, about transformation, and about if this is idea A, where does it go? What does it mutate into? And where would idea B come in? What's the right pacing? So a lot of it is about a kind of internal clock and about thinking this thing can last this long before something else needs to come in or before it needs to change into something else. So it's these very broad brushstroke ideas of transformation and transformation or adaptation or surprise, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And where do you find inspiration?
It's a really unfun, not very satisfying answer of that. It's very internal. There's no, I'm not someone who would look to a poem or painting or anything like that. Or basically, I just try and solve little musical problems on my own, and that, so it'll just purely be, okay, I've thought of a little idea, maybe I've sung it into my phone at some point and I like it, and I might then think, what could this idea become, and I'll kind of draw a shape around what it might happen to it. Or the other way around, sometimes I'll have draw a shape or think of a shape and then make little ideas to fit that shape. I guess, I've definitely done stuff, including films, or I did a big orchestra piece a few years ago, where the starting point was the centenary of the First World War, and that was a real challenge for me to work out how to take something so massive and so not not under my own parameters, not under my control as a starting point. And I really had to find a way into that subject where I felt I could write confidently, and with authority sounds a bit dickish, but with confidence.
Confidence, yeah.
With something so huge.
And do you remember what that point was? What that inroad was that you found?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, well, one, it was been given the blessing of the some of the commissioners that I didn't, that the point of this piece, it was a huge big thing. It was like, part funded by 1480 Now, who did a lot of centenary things for the end of the First World War anniversaries, but it also was for the first night of the BBC Proms and to open the Edinburgh Festival. So, and it was going to be a co-collaboration with 59 Productions, who do these massive external projection mapping things. So, all kinds of fairly full-on collaborators and pressures and stuff. But at some point, I can't remember even who I was talking to, maybe someone from 1480 Now, and they were saying, we don't want this to be lone bugles and sepia horses. This has got to feel authentic and your understanding of it. So I think it was being given the blessing to try and find a way in, no matter how small it was. And I've always found that I would rather write something about something tiny and explode it out. I think I once said some awful quote about rather write a piece about a paperclip than about love. And it sort of makes sense to me that I'd rather take something I can get my head around and look at it from every angle and do a monster version of this tiny thing than take something I can't wrap my head around. So with that piece, it ended up being called 5 Telegrams. And so I sort of split it into 5 movements, and each movement ended up being about a type of communication used in the First World War and a little exploration of something like codes or redaction, or there was these particular types of telegrams where stuff was a sort of set letter that soldiers were sent away with, this kind of weird multiple choice postcard where you scored off things, I'm well. I'm actually looking at one right above this screen where I can see you, which is stuck to my wall. But yeah, it's like they're really amazing because you were just sent off with a bunch of these things, and it says you can't write anything else. You couldn't say Happy Christmas or whatever. It was just like this little kind of equivalent now of a text, I guess. They were sent back super, super quickly, kind of checking in, but not really saying very much. So that's very long-winded. But yeah, so just I took these very practical, almost prosaic little mechanisms, and allowed them those mechanisms, like something as simple as redaction. In that movement of the piece, the music sort of redacts. So I had a phrase, plays round, then when it plays again, it's that one bit of the phrase is interrupted by as if it's been blocked out, and then it goes, it happens more and more and more. So really simple concept, but that felt authentic, or that just felt like, okay, that makes sense, clear, like that's how I'm going to do it.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's amazing. I've never really considered that, but as you say, the concepts of love it means different things to different people, and it's a very kind of big abstract theme, and to write about it, but actually to take a very specific, very small thing and use that as a starting point. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
And just quickly, we're going to talk about go under the skin, but I just want to touch on the MBE.
Right.
Because I was staggered when I read you had an MBE. How does it come about? How does one get an MBE? How do I get an MBE?
Sure. I kind of sort of forget about it, if she says, annoyingly. I think it's because I did this big prompts piece, probably. and I've done, actually, of lots of places, I've had a few proms performances, and I guess maybe that type of institution comes up on, I don't know how the sort of selection stuff works, but that would be my guess, that that's the kind of thing that might be on someone's radar maybe, but I think I'd be kidding myself to think that it would be through my like album or band stuff, which is kind of sad as well. That feels like a kind of slightly strange, or the parameters for evaluating what is. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But you just get a sort of lovely, heavyweight letter in the post. It was a sort of surreal old day. Very just at the start. Was it just pre-COVID? Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Okay. So, you could lock down with your heavy envelope.
Right. That's it.
But I suppose, maybe the proms thing puts you on the map, and then all of the other achievements and things, the albums you've done and the solo stuff, maybe that all feeds into it as well.
Yeah, I've always, part of the reason I didn't ever make like a band name for my other stuff, is that it is all me, and I do try and do it all the same way. I approach it all the same way. So I'd love to think that someone wasn't just only interested in the quotes classical stuff, that they were looking at the other things, and that was a little tiny wee nod to that. Obviously slightly mixed feelings about some of the royal stuff at the moment, but no doubt a kind of really nice recognition of that moment.
Yeah, well, amazing, congratulations.
Thanks.
That's incredible. That's probably a good point to go under the skin. Under the skin. The project that sort of I'd love to sort of have a little chat about is The End We Start From, particularly pertinent because it's out at the moment, and I haven't seen it, but there's a number of people here at the studios who were talking about it over lunch last week. So can you give a brief synopsis of the film for anyone who hasn't seen it?
So the film's an adaptation of a book, same name, that a few people have read. I actually haven't read it, but I really must, where it sounds on some level like a disaster movie, and there is an environmental and disaster side where London or the UK floods, and it's very much set, what if this happened tomorrow? A lot of the kind of chaos and lack of preparation, and it feels very real or very. But also that we just follow one woman who's a sort of nameless character that Jodie Comer plays, who is a brand new mother. And we see her at the start of the film pregnant, and her husband. Yeah, it basically just follows them, I think, for a year as they try to figure out, figure out what to do. But it's funny because I think if you were to describe it as I've very badly just done, it seems a lot more about, you might think, oh God, shots of Big Ben with the water and stuff, but it's much more intimate and personal and much more keyed into, new motherhood and, sense of perseverance and strength and resilience, that is compounded, absolutely no doubt, by the sort of situation this woman finds herself in and the various awful things she deals with. But there's a kind of universality of maybe female strength, and that is really runs through it. So it's kind of very strong and gentle. I mean, that's not because gentle is female, but just that it's very personal, intimate film, as well as this kind of epic backdrop.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because whilst there's an element of interest, albeit morbid, in disaster movies and things like that, it always feels like the more interesting approach is the humanity, the human interest story, and then the backdrop being that, rather than the disaster being the be all and end all, which is probably like in the 80s and 90s. But it's the character study, it's the humanity, and it's like, oh, that could be me. How would I deal with it? How would I cope?
Yeah, and all the very human stuff about, we just don't really know what we're doing, and the chaos of it and the indecision. But ultimately, this woman trying to be a good mother and keep her baby, and the great people she meets on the way, and the awful stuff that happens. It's really, it's hopeful and a really sad film at the same time. Jodie Comer is, amazing, really incredible in it, so strong. So it was a real, I was really chuffed to be asked to do it.
Yeah, amazing. And it did occur to me as well when you said they're sort of being unprepared. I think given how COVID went down and the lack of preparation for that, God help us if London does flood. Cause,
absolutely.
There's no hope at all, is there?
Yeah, absolutely. Totally. Yeah, you definitely have a sense. And you can just imagine it. Remember all the toilet roll panic and all that stuff we had, people fighting over, what was it, pasta, that nonsense. Yeah. I'm sure it feels all too believable in that sense.
So I wonder if it'd be the same then if there was an imminent threat of London flooding, whether everyone would go and stock up on toilet paper, because it never occurred to me that toilet paper would be the most valuable commodity
you just need the rumour to spread, right? And then everyone's freaking out about something that I think there was even something that there wasn't really even a toilet roll shortage. It was just that it was sort of it was like when people with fuel and stuff, right? People were just kind of, not prematurely, but just kind of freaking out and... who knows? I mean, and I think it's the whole country, and they've done this stuff with, they've shot this film on a small budget, but done a beautiful job of getting a sense of how different people would deal with the situation. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think if it does happen, I'm going to head straight out to get a mask and a snorkel and some flippers. Toilet papers, not going to worry about. Get around like the Lilo, bob along, pina colada on the side. Yeah, that's it. So let's talk about the creative process and how you approached scoring the film. Did you start at script stage, or did you have visuals to work with? At what point were you brought into the process, and what was your process? So I've been told, which is really lovely, that the director, Mahalia Bello, knew from the outset that she wanted to work with me, which is really nice. I'm going to say but I think, and so I did have a chat with her a long time before, but I was kind of actively bought in once it was all shot, and they were, I guess, in editing, and I went and had a spotting session with her, which is nice. So it's nice that they'd already been thinking about me, because I think they'd had some of my stuff that they were maybe even listening to a bit as they were shooting, and certainly it meant, which is obviously such a godsend, that some of the temp was mine already, which is really helpful. So everything was, she's very musical, but also knows how I write, or knew my stuff. I think she'd been to a few gigs and stuff of mine. So I guess I knew that's really important, that, to me, that I knew she had a sense so that, the music could have an identity as well. And she would come here to my studio, which is in Somerset House, which is more just like a little writing room, really. It's hardly any equipment. And we would just look at the scenes together, talk about them, what they needed to do. She's obviously talking from a directorial sense of, the quality or the emotion that the scene needs to do, or, what needs to happen. And I'm annoyingly saying unhelpful musical things about like, do you think whatever, it could... I don't even know what. But one thing I did know quite early, or had a really strong... I wanted the film to have a sound, or have a kind of colour to it. I knew I'd be predominantly working with electronics, but I want to have some real instrumental colour. And I just had this sort of... when I watched it with the rough cut, with the temp and stuff, that I thought it should be sort of flute heavy. And still some stuff with strings and things, but I felt there was something about the intimacy that, sure, lovely soaring string stuff is amazing, and there's definitely some stringy moments in this score as well, but that there was something about breath, and one, a note as a breath, and the beginning and end of that, and something about not just like a big mass string sound that felt like something I tried to suggest to May, how did she think that would be? And and as well as real flutes and different, alto flute and regular fluty synths as well. So there's kind of airy sound to the whole thing. And I think it also slightly worked which was initially a bit of a challenge for me, because some of the cues, I like writing things with these big geometric shapes I was talking about before, lots of big builds and cuts and swerves, and actually here there were definitely points things needed to head to, but stuff also had to cut, not necessarily, sometimes fade out or find ways to evolve. So I had to find softer shapes. So I think thinking about that kind of colour helped as well.
Yeah. Well, I think what was lovely listening to it, I definitely feel that breathiness. There's almost a muted quality to it as well. I don't know if for some reason I think it probably comes across as sort of the underwater thing, but quite often there's what feels like, I don't know, it sounds like almost electronic synth stuff, but quite a lot of delays and feedback delays and things washing around in spaces, which provides this sort of lovely soft backdrop on which you then have the sort of soft, and as you say, the flutes and the strings. Was that the kind of tonal colour that you were talking about? Yeah,
I think there's definitely, there's there's a detachment, I think, in some of these situations where things are, you can't, stuff's happening, and I wanted to keep some of that. So some stuff I tried to make super direct and super in your face, in the way that I worked with Jack Ross to mix, and we tried to make sure some stuff felt very clean and that other things were more diffused and in a sort of wash, or wash seems too watery, but in a softer space. And there's some bits that are definitely more rhythmic and some pulse stuff as well. It's not all just lovely beds of air. I've tried to make sure there's some sort of rhythmic stuff, propulsion stuff as well.
Yeah, no, it's lovely. I was listening to one of the cues? Was it Little Human?
Little World?
No, Little World, yeah. It almost brought me to tears because I could almost imagine what was happening on screen, but it was beautiful. Actually,
that's a really nice. That was a nice cue to work with, because it's a kind of little clockwork little flute line. And I remember May, it's in this scene where the main characters have gone to seek safety in at the parents' house of the main character's husband, but it's this kind of denial. And I remember May saying she wanted something where she even said the phrase, which really stuck with me, like, they're in their own little world, they're just kidding themselves that it's all going to be okay, that they can grow their own vegetables and shoot animals. But if you actually see the film, it's kind of, even though they're proudly coming back in with, I don't know, a dead rabbit, it's absolutely tiny and the supplies are running thin, but they're trying, think that they've got this kind of la la la, everything's going great sense. So yeah, I think I was trying to write something that had this surface, clockwork, automation. Something is just keeping going with unease brewing in the underneath.
Yeah, amazing. And you were saying earlier, in terms of distilling things down, and you gave the example of a paperclip or redaction for one of your projects. Was there something like that within this that you kind of distilled it down to as a starting point, or not?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. There was a few things where there was a sense of, there's a kind of couple of little themes that evolved to reflect different situations. So there's a kind of slight sanctuary. There's a bit of material that comes back a few times, and it's kind of evolved through the different scenarios you hear it in to reflect a kind of progression of the film, or where it's at in that sense. And there's another little theme that is slightly associated with, it wasn't simple as, yes, here's the theme for this guy or this person, but that is about one of the main characters that we used a few times to show, to reflect him, but I didn't want to make it too obvious or too explicit. And I'm trying to think if there was anything else that we did that was technical, and that was an idea in that sense. Give me one sec. Well, it was also interesting because of the sound design. There's a lot of water in the sound design. Even if it's unseen water, there's water, there's rain, and there's water happening, but there's quite often actual water in the water sounds for in other circumstances. So trying to find ways to, quite often I had to work out ways to like, actually in the opening track that I did, she's in labour, and there's sort of two peaks in a way, and one is sound design and one is what's happening on this, and I had to sort of find a way to find one way to push something and keep something else back that brewed in a different way. So I think maybe that doesn't quite answer your question, but I think there was a few ways that I had to sort of solve, not really problems, but work out how to do something that would still work musically with other challenges happening on the screen.
Yeah, and I think as well as it's quite a common challenge, isn't it? Depending on the sound design, there's probably a happy place in the middle where the sound design isn't competing with the music and vice versa, but hopefully they're working together. Do you ever try and kind of blur the line between music and sound design yourself? I
haven't had I would love to, as I do more in this world, hopefully, and find a way to I guess make that more joined up conversation. And I've been lucky, I think, with there hasn't been any massive problems. I like the sound design's been great for the projects I've been involved with. I don't think it's massively my skill set I don't think I would want to try and take anything too textural on as a, I definitely think I could do textural, yeah, but I guess super, can you, recreate this stuff? I think, I already know I'd be awful at it. So I think the ideal for me would be to work with someone, obviously you always want the music to be loud and you always want it to be really present, and to find those moments where the music can really push through is really important. Yeah.
And I mean, it's obvious that you enjoy marrying the worlds of electronica and sort of more organic conventional instrumentation. So, I mean, how deep down do you drill with sound synthesis?
Not at all.
No, okay.
For me, it's the last bit of my writing process. And I use loads of presets, and I have loads of just really simple plugins that I like and reuse over and over again, because for me, I kind of have ideas of what types of sounds I need, and I'll almost be thinking kind of orchestrally, like what is there space for in this texture, what is there, something dry or something fizzy or something low, and then if I've got ideas of the dry and fizzy and low stuff that I know and like, in a way, like if I'm writing for a violin, that I go to old friends that work well for me, and and that's probably partly experience and confidence thing. I guess if I'm honest, are kind of interesting. It's just not where I'm not. I don't have time or headspace to kind of super nerdily get into that stuff. And I really, hugely admire, and it's not any criticism on all the many people who do that stuff. Just I feel for the way that I write, the ingredients of what I'm trying to do are what matter more to me than the production side. Like, I know that production is not my forte. So I will try and make the materials work almost... if I'm writing on Sibelius, I'll make sure that the materials work as just like 7 pianos, so the actual ingredients, the nuts, and the crotchets and quavers and rhythms work separate. So I'm not relying on the production stuff because it's not my skill set.
So I suppose in that sense, the electronica is more the condiments to your main meal.
Yeah, and I say that. I mean, I'm definitely getting better and I enjoy it more, but I just don't. When I first started writing electronics, I was diving straight into Ableton and trying to, watching millions of little tutorials on how to do stuff and how to, tricks that people were doing, and it was really exciting and overwhelming, but I just couldn't work out how it made any what relation it bore to my nerdy score writing, and how to do what, I don't know, making some kind of sidechain compression pump thing, what that was going to do with my laboriously made score. So I eventually stopped going straight to Ableton and figured out this thing of writing, drawing, then writing, notating, then exporting MIDI, and going into, and then actually, so now when I need something new, I'll just keep going back to Sibelius and writing a new thing and exporting the MIDI, even if it's just a couple of bars, and evolving it that way. And yeah, I do. It's not at all. I've been a bit flippant to imply that it's just like lobbing a couple of presets. I know the types of sounds I want, and I do tweak them, but it's quite instinctive. I kind of know when they're good enough, and I try not to let it bother me if they're, I don't know, if they are just, if it's working, I'm not going to try and overthink. Oh God, I can't even think what would be an insecurity. This is sound someone else might have used, or I've used it before, or something like that.
Yeah. And I suppose sometimes in the digital world, because you can, in theory, tweak and change forever, I think before digital, when back in the analog world, you had to make a decision on the sounds and commit to them, whereas the danger is that with digital, you can tweak it forever. So at some point, you have to draw the line and go, okay, and it sounds like, well, the starting point. And interestingly, so do you, when you say, so you write stuff into Sibelius and then you export the MIDI, so do you don't program things in, and is your sort of more your starting point just sort of sitting down with a score sheet or Sibelius and coming up with ideas? So you're not really sitting at a piano or...
No.
Oh, fascinating.
So it's drawing, and then I will sit at a little MIDI keyboard, and if I need a certain chord, I'll sit and figure out what that chord is, but I never improvise. Or it'll be like singing maybe something into a phone, a little idea, and then trying to work out what that is on a piano, sort of note at a time. But I don't have that. Well, I find for myself, something's not going to happen by or happen in the way that I want through my terrible playing.
Yeah. It's fascinating because years ago I worked with Stephen Warbeck and was blown away because he gets a piece of score paper and he just sort of writes something down, and if it wasn't for technology, I would not be able to compose music. I need to be able to, I'm so ear driven, I need to be able to hear it in order to know whether or not it works. So it's fascinating that these two very different approaches, and it sounds like yours is quite similar to his. Yeah,
well, I definitely use the playback. Like, I like the awful general MIDI of Sibelius, and so I'm using those terrible sounds, those like 9 pianos, to make sure the ingredients work. I definitely am using the playback. I'm not sitting looking at the paper going, yes, I hear this, and I can sort of hear scores, but not in massive detail of the exact harmony. So I rely on the playback a lot, but I deliberately use the playback kind of sounding as bad as possible to check that it works before I try and figure out what the electronic side is.
Well, I suppose if you can get it sounding as good as possible with the terrible Sibelius sounds, when you actually assign real instruments to it, it's going to sound amazing.
That's that's sort of the challenge I set myself, and that's such a lovely moment. If you've made something kind of work with, an in choir and sort of, we all know what those sounds sound like, then it's a gift. It's a great moment to kind of go, okay, let's actually find some awesome, epic, massive bass to change instead of this piano or this sort of MIDI trombone I've been using or whatever. And that's really exciting. I really enjoy that process because it's big brushstroke transformations, and everything just immediately sounds a zillion times better. But I try not to leapfrog straight in there.
Yeah. That's incredible. Brilliant. Well, I suppose we'll talk about your influences in a sec, but just before, obviously Tuesday is out sometime this year. What can we expect from the score for that?
So the score is really different to the end we start from. I really enjoyed doing it. Again, it's a very different film. It's funny and heartbreaking and fantastical and bonkers, and it's got a very different feel to the whole thing. Another first-time director who I loved working with, but a very similar type of process. Actually, I think initially there wasn't going to be score in the film. There's lots of very very good and clever sound design in the film because of some of these fantastical elements. They've really done an amazing job imagining how, I don't want to say spoil too much about it, but there's an element or a character in the film who ends up having very distinctive sound design. But I think once the idea for score came in, some of the score, there's kind of one massive epic cue in the middle that I got to do, where I really got to just like go for it and write something that gets like, it's so exciting hearing that moment in the film because it's so pushed up front and it's like just like a big massive needle drop. And then other things, actually, what was quite fun is Dinah, the director, was really interested in creating a lot of I did it all with percussion, electronics again, but percussion and cello, but not played conventionally. So there's a lot of quite extended technique stuff with the strings and percussion. We used a lot of sandpaper, and she wanted sort of breath, not like the same similar, but sort of newspaper and scrumpled sounds. So it's very textural, and there's a lot. I'm trying to remember the quality of what it was that she said that she wanted that led us to that stuff. I think I was just sort of playing her these ideas I had, and we were getting really excited about some of the sounds. There was this amazing, I remember this amazing session with the cellist Maddie Cutter, where she decided she could just sound like a modem or like those old dial-in tones with that bang, bang, bang through her kind of overpressure stuff, and we used that a few times. I think it was just a sense of there's lots of moments of the film where stuff just feels like it's kind of, things are splintering and falling apart, and reality, the kind of cracks in reality, I guess, or in the characters, or in the whole world fabric, she says dramatically. And so I think these kind of slightly heightened weird sounds had space, which was obviously a total gift to be given this free rein to just do all this weird and wonderful stuff.
Yeah. This is where the excitement is, isn't it? Just sort of getting experimental and fantastic. Getting a taste. In terms of influences, I suppose start musically. Are there specific albums, pieces of music that you can identify from probably your more formative years that created some kind of epiphany in terms of like, whoa, what's that? Things that just really stick out in your mind now, and you think have possibly, gone some way to informing what you do today?
Normally when I'm asked that question, the answer is, which is true, that I don't listen to music, and I, which sounds a bit miserable, but it doesn't help me creatively to hear other stuff, and I'd. For lots of reasons, it doesn't. I don't want to be thinking about how someone else has done something. Obviously I have to if there's some temp, but as soon as I can, I will just. I don't try and ever. I'll try and do something that's wildly different if I can, just because I don't want to try and think of another reference point in that way. Similarly, even writing my own stuff, I don't want to be thinking about how someone else has started a track or, I don't know, had some big thing. I'd much rather be thinking about solving that problem on my own terms. So, yeah, for myself now, currently, I basically just listen to audiobooks. And I listen to them all the time. I have them on as I'm falling asleep, while I'm walking to my studio, while I'm eating lunch. So I love having stories happening. But, music-wise, there are things, when I listen to music more, and I still go to concerts, and I'll listen to stuff that friends make, and I don't hate music at all, but I just don't seek it out for creative reasons. So, but there are things from, I guess, when I was a teenager or early 20s that I love, but I think it's more for kind of nostalgia reasons, and it's like the Pet Shop Boys or Queen or discovering playing Shostakovich or Gerald Barry or Louis Andriessen, when I discovered that kind of stuff as I studying composing, and those things I still will listen to because I remember how exciting it was to hear them for the first time, but I don't think I turned to them creatively. No.
Okay. And what about visually? What about film? Was there anything did you watch a lot of film when you were growing up, and was there anything there that sort of really sticks out in your mind?
Didn't watch masses of film. I was definitely some kind of, much more music nerd. Every night I was doing a choir or a wind band or an orchestra. So I was, plunge, and that became my kind of sanctuary. And that was the thing I did, was just, tons and tons and tons of playing of different types. And yeah, I don't remember. I love films and I love TV. I definitely see it sometimes. I want to try and be more ambitious with how I watch, because every time I watch something that I have in my head might feel a bit challenging or difficult, I'm always pleased I did. And I don't know, I saw Anatomy of a Fall recently, and I remember like whinging that I wasn't really in the mood, and subtitles or something terrible like that, and of course it's unbelievable, and I just loved it. And so it's a good lesson to remind myself to push through the kind of comfort of watching some kind of nonsense, which I really enjoy. If I call it nonsense, I like all the stuff everybody else likes. I've been enjoying Slow Horses, and I've did all the Successions, and Andor I loved, and all that sort of stuff. It's all amazing. But I need
Traitors.
What's that? Traitors. I did the first Traitors. I find awkwardness really difficult to watch. I find so sometimes I struggle with kind of comedy. Those kind of bleak, The Office type comedies. And the first Traitors, I did watch it, but I would just fast forward through all this sort of awful, backstabby, bitchy chats, which I know is sort of the stuff that other people love. I don't even know what bits I like, the stupid challenges. So I haven't watched the latest one. Everyone, seems to be saying it's amazing. So I don't know, young TV, I don't really remember. I remember loving the usual stuff, Matrix and all that kind of stuff, but I don't remember a particular, apart from just being a huge wuss. Actually, I do have one really, really pivotal, because I was very kind of sheltered and didn't watch anything, and very naive, and had no idea that films were meant to kind of scare, just that they were, I'd only ever seen kids' films. And I remember in primary school going to a birthday party at cinema where I think we were meant to be going to see one of the Supermans. So 80s, but for whatever reason it wasn't on, or it was sold out or whatever, and we ended up going to see a Jaws, and I just could not believe it. It just was such an immense shock to suddenly be blood, and people were dying, and
hands floating in the water.
The absolute mind-blowing idea that this thing was when all it had been till then had been, never-ending story, and this lovely, Care Bears, and just happy memories, and just oh my God, what is this? And now I can't watch horror films. I really sometimes struggle to tell if something's good or bad, because I'm just in it. I can really get stuck in films, which is a nice thing, but it doesn't mean I can't watch anything scary.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I can't even get my head around watching Jaws at that age, because I watched Ghostbusters as a kid.
Right.
And that gave me nightmares for weeks. So watching Jaws,
I think I didn't really watch any of it. I think I just sat and whimpered with my fingers over my eyes, pretending to watch it. Terrible. Yeah.
But similarly, I do struggle with horror films. Sometimes I did force myself to watch Midsommar, which is amazing, but I had to watch it in 3 sittings, because it's so, it's not horror in the sort of jump scare sense of things, but it's so sinister and so unnerving that I couldn't watch for sort of more than 45 minutes at a time.
I have to watch anything. I definitely couldn't watch Midsommar, but anything even slightly scary, I have to sort of trick myself by kind of half watching it. I sort of I sometimes sit and watch A Weird Place next to my television, where it's
do a jigsaw whilst you're watching it.
I'm kind of la la la. Oh, there's something. Oh, never mind. No, I'm fascinated watching this wall and my cushions next to the telly, because I just have to pretend it's just sort of and sometimes the smaller the screen, the better. And obviously if you can get the sound out. Another one I remember really clearly was going to the cinema with some friends to see. I can't even think what it'd be, something great like Bill and Ted or whatever, and going to the loo and then accidentally walking back into the wrong cinema And, you know, my friends weren't there, but I thought, okay, maybe they've gone to the loo. And then this like awful, terrifying, whatever it be, I don't know, Nightmare on Elm Street starting. And I'm sitting waiting for ages because, you know, thinking, maybe, I don't know, maybe I thought it was a trailer, or I didn't know it was, God, Bill and Ted's a bit darker than I expected or whatever. And it took me about like half an hour to think, okay, this is something seriously gone wrong. Keanu Reeves has taken a really not aged well or whatever.
No, and there's a lot more murdering than
a lot more murdering. Turns
out
those guys need to get some help.
Yeah.
Anyway, so not up for the scary stuff. I mean, I don't know if I could write There's even one in Tuesday. I wouldn't even definitely call it. There's nothing. There's no horror moments. It's just a slightly dark moment that I still, I found it hard to watch, even in the film. Now I've seen it 1,000 times, you know, probably more than that, but still like, I get nervous.
The power of it, isn't it? The power
right.
of film. Amazing. Well, that's probably a great place to wrap things up. I do have some quick fire questions which I like to finish with. This is where we go deep with the first one. What's your favourite biscuit?
Oh my God, that's a massive question. I'm just going to go straight into the Jaffa cake. It's moist.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Hannah Peel also favourite is a Jaffa cake.
She's a clever woman.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to get bogged down in this
Get
again.
away from your cake chat. Yeah.
Exactly, but is it a cake? Is it a biscuit? And this is something that I feel like I've spoken about too much in the podcast now. So we're not going to
second choice, those Borders ginger ones that are covered in dark chocolate.
Okay, nice, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
very classy.
Yeah,
but moisture is a thing I seek in food, and I think a Jaffa cake, it's one of the sole biscuits that can really step up there.
Yeah, it ticks the moisture box, definitely.
Yeah.
What's a little known fact about you?
Oh, wow. Well, I'm currently doing, I say this as if it's a great passion of mine. My sister bought me roller skate disco lessons. And I'm doing lessons just now. Actually, I'm at Maddie, the cellist I was telling you about, who's in my band, is doing them. We're doing together, and I am so bad. So I'm really finding it extremely difficult. Maddie's really good. I think she got some in lockdown and has been like whizzing around her kitchen. And as soon as we start, I'm just dripping with terror sweats. I think I thought it'd just be like round and round circles, sort of jiving away, but no, it's like tippy up onto like two wheels, and then onto the two wheels at the back of the skates, and
going backwards. Spinning.
We haven't done backwards, but everything feels like you're just constantly feeling that you're about to fall, and so I'm trying to do that, and maybe I won't, but I'm trying to imagine the end of this course where I'm going to suddenly be like sort of jiving around some rink and some cool roller disco, but it feels just now that I'm just going to be staggering around sweating, but yeah, that's what I'm doing at the moment.
So we can look out for you in like a roller disco flash mob down at Trafalgar Square or something in 6 months' time.
Still probably sweating and clutching onto someone. I don't think it's gonna work out well for me.
No. But good fun, right?
Good. I mean, definitely good fun. Great present. You know, and I'm nobly persevering with it, even though I'm, easily the worst in the class. I thought it was going to be a beginner's class, and there's people like whizzing around on one leg, sitting down on the floor with one leg vertically, the other leg held up by their ear, whizzing around. Yeah, people doing that kind of shit. And I am bum out, wiggling along, sweating and swearing, just trying to get around in one piece.
Trying to stay upright.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. It sounds good fun. It's funny because before Christmas, so over Christmas, I was looking at my 4-year-old niece and I were working on some disco moves from Saturday Night Fever. So we had a YouTube video of the disco moves, and I was thinking like, I'd love to learn officially disco dancing, not roller disco dancing, but officially disco dancing. So I was looking over Christmas to see if I could find any in London. Haven't found any yet.
Are there not? You think that'd be...
There was a couple of weird things on Facebook, and they hadn't posted for a while, and I didn't really properly look into it. It was a surface level.
You need to look at like Pineapple Studios, or some kind of like dance place. But you also, maybe this is the problem, is that if it's too... Because you don't want to go somewhere and suddenly the whole thing would be full of 20-year-olds with leggings on who are
amazing dancers.
Terrible. And you're, that's that's kind of what I feel is happening in my roller disco lesson. But yeah, it's kind of it's definitely good to be doing something you've never done before.
I think maybe geriatric care home lessons is probably more my target audience. But yeah. Next question. Other than horror movies, what scares you?
Ooh, okay. Lots of stuff. I'm an absolute Jessie. But one thing that I have a very mixed relationship with is roller coasters, where they really, really scare me, but they fascinate me as well because they scare me. And when I've done them, I feel so amazing. So I have this kind of odd relationship where I will, like some kind of porn addict, watch millions of POV videos, people who film themselves at the front of roller coasters. And I will just watch those, sweating again. Imagining what it's like to be in them. And so people go like, oh yeah, great, okay, do you want to come with us? We're going to Thorpe Park. Like, oh no, like I can't.
No, I'll just watch them on YouTube.
I get my thrills just watching YouTube. Yeah, so I mean, I've been to quite a lot of roller coasters where I guess I'm giving just very mixed messages. People are like, I thought you liked roller coasters, and it's simultaneously this weird thing where I've actually broken into sweats thinking about it here. My hands are sweating. So we in the band went to Six Flags in LA, and we went on some of the coasters which are like, about 10 times bigger and scarier and longer than any coaster in the UK. And it was what you need to do is not know it's happening. You just need to suddenly, right guys, we're going right now to this thing. It's a bit like, I don't know, having a dentist thing or something where the worst thing is knowing it's coming and you can sleep at night. So anyway, I managed to go on all the scary shit, but I was really in a sort of odd, quiet, psyching myself up mood all day, and then euphoric, like I'd sort of solved some kind of epic world problem by the end.
Well, it's funny because it sounds like obviously the way beyond a fear is to face it and push yourself through it, but it's almost like you doing that almost fosters this continued sort of fear and dread of it, but even though you are facing it and pushing
well, you
through.
Tell yourself, don't you, that you do one roller coaster and you're like, well, yeah, but what if this next one is a really bad, so I think you feel it's challenges to do, and I make myself, this is all real insights into how deeply unfun I am, but I do them multiple times, so I'll do it.
Right.
Do it and then go back and do it immediately if I can, and then I get, and by the third time sometimes you can let go and actually be like, screaming, and I'm I'm somebody who screams the whole way around these which is a sign that I'm into it, because otherwise I'm just silently praying, and
better a screamer than a puker.
Right, that is true. A puker, I mean, once the voms are out, it's time to go home.
It's game over, isn't it?
Yeah.
Awesome. And the final question in the quickfire questions round is, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Oh man. Oh God, so many. I'm just literally Rolodexing a very dated reference through the regrets. I guess just doing stuff anyway. That's the kind of earnest answer. It's just like, just do it. And keep trying new things, not overthinking things too much, just believe in yourself, little Anna, and do it. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Maybe I should have bought some kind of shares in something.
Google or Bitcoin. You should have invested in Bitcoin in 2000.
God, I know. Yeah, I mean, oh God, it's just. It's funny when you say that. I know there's probably some kind of whimsical thing about hanging on to my Doc Martens, but I just feel like, the multitude of terrible decisions. But I think, just try and have fun with it all as much as you can along the way.
Have fun. Get out your comfort zone. Don't be afraid to get out your comfort zone. Awesome. Well, Anna, it's been a pleasure to chat. Thank you so much for sharing your creative process and experiences with us. Do you social if people want to find you and your music? Obviously, you're on Spotify, but where else can people find you?
I do sometimes social. I'm Anna H. Meredith on Twitter and Instagram.
Twitter and Instagram. Awesome. Anna Meredith, thanks very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, and given that you've listened this far, I feel you might have, then I would be honoured and incredibly grateful if you could take a moment to subscribe, rate and review on your podcast platform of choice. By subscribing, you'll automatically be notified each time a new episode drops, and by rating the show, you tell the artificial intelligence that will soon be running the world that this podcast is worth listening to. I certainly get a lot of insights and value from these conversations, and I genuinely hope you do too. If you'd like to get in touch with the show, then you can email me, podcast@larpmusic.com. Larpmusic.com is my digital abode, and the home of the podcast is larpmusic.com/Sync Music Matters Podcast. And Sync Music Matters Podcast is hyphenated. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.